Hey, y'all, welcome to another episode of Corporate Quitter. I want to talk today about when the time is to push forward or scale back in your business. And the reason why this is coming up is just because I've experienced this many times of push forward and scale back moments, those really pivotal moments and certain instances in my business that were actually like very much required. But also, I had two conversations this week that just so happened to be around this. So it seems to be relevant, right? It's in the air. People are talking about it. So one was a client, one has been a long-term follower, someone who's been in the community, who has been watching my journey as like inspiration as well as like reminding herself like, hey, this is the reality of doing business. And she had shared that she felt like less alone and less shameful because it's normal, right? And it is. All of these things are normal. It's not talked about quite as much except for the people who've quote unquote made it. But I think the push forward scale back sort of questioning is important regardless of what milestone or metric you're at in your business, whether you're just fucking starting, like literally like today, you're like, okay, this is the name. This is what I'm going to do. And I'm just going to start with it. Or if you're a little far down the line, or if you're not a quitter yet, you haven't even kind of touched the surface. You're just, putting your foot in the water of entrepreneurship. This sort of idea of push forward, scale back is really important. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to take a minute and thank our sponsors. Novo, they're not a bank, but they're a fintech company. And I've been using them for the past 6 months to help me kind of transform my business. And now at this point, we're actually working together to help them kind of grow their business. So we're working on product development and figuring out things to help you as a business owner work better, right? So saving you more time, money, energy, and all of those things. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that I can't share, but if you're not signed up, I would encourage you to sign up so that when those things become available, you'll be the first to get access to them and you'll be grandfathered into anything that they currently have that's for free. So if you have any questions, reach out. Would love to help, figure out if Novo is the right fit for you, or I can put you in touch with someone at Novo. Love the team. They're great. I've met them all in person, even the CEO. They're phenomenal. I might actually interview Michael on the podcast, which would be really cool. But if you have any questions or want to sign up, it's completely free. And you can see that in the show notes or on our YouTube channel in the description. So I'm going to go through a couple things. So the first is identifying the signs to push forward, when recognizing when to scale back. And then we're going to get in some tips and tools in order to help you with this. So firstly, when we come to identifying the signs for when it's right to push forward, when it's time to buckle down and just do the damn thing, is there's 4 areas that usually touch on. So there's passion and drive, market demand, financial readiness, and your support system. Now, there's many other instances. This is not 100% personalized, but over the course of my time of talking to thousands of quitters, these 4 tend to come up. So the first, right, is passion and drive. So the importance of having passion and intrinsic motivation within what you're doing is extremely important. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have moments where you have to like take a step back and you lose that momentum and you lose the motivation. You have this moment of like, what the fuck am I doing, right? Why am I doing this? Why am I putting so much on the line? Why am I striving towards a vision that I don't fully understand, right? That's a very normal thing you're going to experience. And even at this point in my journey, when I'm making the money and again, we have the accolades, I have the media credibility, I have all these things. And yet, even for myself, I'm like, are we supposed to be doing this? We all have those moments of doubt and it's okay. That doesn't mean that you should backtrack, right? It doesn't mean that that's not the right place you're supposed to be. And if anything, it's actually a really great indicator that you are trying your best to find a path that is perfectly aligned for you versus just kind of ducking out. Now, the one indicator or a sign that you need to keep doing this, right, within that passion and drive sort of topic or, kind of that group, if you will, is that you have an idea or again, this vision that just won't shut up. Like you try to shove it down, you try to push it away and it keeps coming back up. I've had this multiple times on my podcast, which is why we're on season 4. I've had to take breaks because I've had this moment of like, who am I talking to? What am I doing? Am I even helping people? All of that. But the idea won't shut up. I can't seem to get too far away from a microphone, whether it's through my phone, whether it's through the podcast. It just, no matter what, it always comes up. The one thing to say with this, though, is when you have something that won't shut up, an idea, a vision, a goal, a dream, whatever it is, right? It is a clear indicator that that is something you should pursue, but don't confuse this with the shoulds of life. If you're like, oh, I should post online. Oh, I should create a podcast. Oh, I should be a creator. Oh, I should be a consultant, whatever the fucking thing is, you got to stop for a second and ask yourself, am I putting the should and affixing that to this because societally or friend wise or family wise, something is pressuring me to do things that I actually don't feel good about? Or is this something that you're saying should, right? I should do this thing because I myself, the future version of myself who has some of these things, right? The money, the accolades, the successful business, would be doing these things. So I, as the kind of pre-version of my future self, should be doing these things to create those habits. That's a bit different. Now, Another great indicator in the topic of passion and drive when it comes to identifying signs to push forward is a lot of coincidences. So I love signs, whether it's numbers, whether it's physical things. So one of my biggest indicators or signs that I'm on the right path is crabs. The reason why is because I affixed that to my grandmother who had passed away a few years ago. I was really close with her. And the reason why I picked a crab is because she loves seafood. We had a love for that together. And also, I live in Austin, which is like a desert sort of centralized location sort of city. And crabs are not really that prominent here, right? If I did cactuses or butterflies or something that's more attuned to this location, to me, it wouldn't feel so much as a sign. So I wanted to find something that was a bit different. Now, there's a book called Signs. It's a light blue cover. I forget who wrote it. Great book if you're looking to sort of find those examples for you to help you in making decisions or just like looking for things to tell you you're on the right path. To each their own if this is sort of something that you don't believe in or you do. I just find that in this, journey of entrepreneurship, I need every little sign and every little thing to help me on my path when the trust within myself and the universe, right, life and others sort of kind of dips, right? I need something to kind of bring me back home when I'm like too down in the dumps or too down a rabbit hole that's just like negative, right? So again, you don't have to kind of think about coincidences, signs, and things like that, but it's really helpful for me and many others. Another thing too in the way of coincidences is in run-ins with people and conversations that are kind of all kind of in the same sort of area or the same topic or whatever it is. So if you're recognizing that you're running into a lot of people from your past, if you're having a lot of conversations with people that you maybe normally wouldn't, and or if you yourself are saying, "Oh, I need help with X, Y, and Z," and then all of a sudden someone shows up to have a conversation around that completely unprompted, those are also signs, and they can give you great sort of inspiration as well as guidance of like, okay, this is something that I can do, but maybe I'm just having a sign of weakness, or I need more tools, or I need help. When the student is ready, the mentor appears, or the teacher appears. That could be a moment to say, okay, I'm ready to push forward because I have more information. I have that help, or I had a conversation that helped me have a self aware, very like internal moment to reflect, okay, this is what's going on, and this is what needs to change, and this is how I have to show up differently. So the whole passion and drive conversation, I think is really important. It is the single biggest thing that will be the differentiator between people who are successful or not. Money's great, right? Connections are great. All those things are great and they're required in business. But I've seen tons of people who make the money and they come and go and like that's it. Like it was just sort of like there's no longevity. And the people that I'm talking to, if you're anything like me, you're trying to build something that you can do not maybe essentially forever, but you're building something that is sustainable. So that's that. Now, the next part is market demand. This is a little bit more right brain, right? It's a lot more rational than it is, right? Science and woo woo and all of that shit. And even passion, which is something you really can't tangibly hold in your hand. But market demand, right? That is something where essentially you analyze the market trends and you find if your audience that you're talking to, or, just even generally online in the world, if people are actually looking for your services or the things that you're talking about, right? The other thing too is understanding, have I found a gap in the market, right? Am I able to bring my secret sauce into the world and help a certain group of people? Is that something that's actually in demand? Now, this is not necessarily the easiest thing to do, but when you're thinking about, do I scale back or push forward, right? And scale back, it doesn't mean you necessarily pull back everything that you're doing. It just means like, do I have a minute to step back to then recognize like, am I doing the right thing? Do I need to have an audit of what's working, what's not? Am I happy? Is my audience happy? Like those are things to really be kind of, cognizant of. But again, market demand. So if you're stuck on this, because this is going to be a hard one, and honestly, like it's fucking boring. I hate doing market trends analysis shit. Like to me, that's so not sexy. So use AI, use ChatGPT to analyze trends and demands. Have them say, hey, like, look at all my profiles and give them all the links to your LinkedIn, your Instagram, wherever you're posting, wherever you're creating content, wherever you're trying to bring yourself or put yourself out into the world and say, like, based on what you see, my skill set, my work experience, all of this, like, is there a demand for X, Y, and Z? Can you find a gap? What can I bring that's different than everyone else and see what it comes up with? The AI tools that are available now can probably give you at least a starting point. If you yourself can't, hire coaches or kind of purchase products and digital items and things like that to get more clarity on what you should be focusing on. But also, I do want to mention that I did an episode about 2 weeks ago with Tiffany Knighton. It's episode 150, where we talked about understanding your brand story, right? Because every single one of us, regardless if you think your life is boring or not, has a captivating story to tell. And essentially, what makes you different and what makes people sell out programs and have media segments and all that stuff doesn't mean they're any more special than you are, but they're able to capture their story better. So I would recommend listening to that episode maybe next after this one, just to get an idea on how you can craft your story so that in this case, when it comes to market demand, you actually have something that people want and you're capitalizing on what makes you special at the same time. Now, the next aspect, and I would say one of the biggest ones for many people, is financial readiness. So I just want to start off by saying I'm not a financial advisor and I'm an extremist. So I'm someone who will easily drop thousands of dollars when the time is right, when I feel the gut pull to get coaching, to get consulting, to get freelance work, to go on an experience, something like that. I've done that pretty much all of my 20s. Wouldn't say that's necessarily the smartest thing, but I mean, it has helped me in leaps and bounds. I'm someone who thinks that if you are in between a tough decision, you make the decision that's the most exciting and it'll be the best story to tell. So, for example, like paying off thousands of dollars of debt and experiencing things that most people don't. That to me is a sexy story. And especially as someone who wants to write a book, I'm in the middle of writing one, but I want to eventually publish it with a publisher. You got to have a sexy, cool story, an underdog story to tell. And in order to have an underdog story and a cool story to tell, you have to do cool fucking shit and you also have to fuck up. So that's just, I'm going to preface this by saying that in this financial readiness category. But essentially, one of the things with financial readiness in the corporate quitter lens is that financial readiness doesn't necessarily mean that you have all the money that you need to do all the things you want. Sometimes it looks like actually having none of it and having to be resourceful and find something that's cheap or free, which has been a bulk of what I've created over the course of the years doing corporate quitter. I haven't really had much help. Everything that I've made has gone back into this business. I don't have investor funding. I don't have rich uncle to call. So for me, this actually is a pain in my ass because in my brain, I'm like, oh, if only I had the resources that everyone else would, I would be able to create so much more, but it's actually helping me to be more resourceful and help all of you. So there's a benefit of not having the resources that you think you need. But the idea of being quote unquote ready, it's fucking horseshit. It's complete bullshit. You'll always not feel ready enough to do the things you need to do, whether it's hire someone, create the product, put yourself online, whatever it is. But when it comes to assessing your financial readiness, there are a couple different things. So there's the physical, right? Actually looking at all of your debt, how much money you're making, what's in your bank accounts, what's in your savings. Do you have 401k? Do you have retirement? Even also taking an audit of like, who can I call? What can I do if things get tight? Do you have a friend? Do you have a rich uncle, right? Do you have other means of doing things that when you're in this moment of like, okay, am I supposed to push forward or am I supposed to scale back? You could say, okay, I have actually a lot more options than I thought. So if my plan right now doesn't work for pushing forward with this new product or trying to go viral or whatever it is, at least these are my fail safes, right? I have all these other things. Now, the other thing when talk about financial readiness, it's not just physical, right? It's not just how much is in your bank account. It's not so much like what your fail safes are in terms of the physical monetary, amount and things like that, which are obviously super important. But a lot of it is actually in recognizing mentally and emotionally what you can handle. So some people can't handle the financial stress that comes with entrepreneurship and they bail. And that's totally okay. I've been there. The other thing too, that will be an indicator of do I push forward or scale back? Because I've been there many, many times where mentally, emotionally was at wit's end because I was like, okay, no money's coming in. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm not, do I just spend what I have left to go do the thing? Do I have to hold on to it for dear life? And in more cases than not, again, I'm an extremist. Don't do what I say, do what feels right for you. But I most always, if I have this littlest bit of money and there's an opportunity that's right there for me to spend to learn something that might change my life, I'm going to fucking do it. Because again, I've been doing this for 3 years and mentally and emotionally, I'm stable enough to be able to do this, right? And I'm not even saying financially stable to do this. I just know that I trust myself enough and I trust in life and the universe. And I also have trust within the people who are around me to help me if shit hits the fan, right? I didn't have that in the beginning. I didn't have the support system, which we're going to get into in a second. But I just quickly want to remind y'all, again, when it comes to pushing forward and scaling back, I think sometimes people think that when money dries up, that it's an indicator that you need to scale back. And I just want to say that's not the case because almost every single time where I'm in this pivotal moment of like, oh, fuck, like I hired someone and then all of a sudden, like this month just dried up. Like, or, oh, like even one time I was like, I basically had enough for rent, a little bit more extra for rent. And then I had this opportunity fall into my lap to fly to New York to go to a conference with someone. And I was like, this is fucking dumb. Like anyone would say, pay your rent and then like go read a book, right? You don't have to go to this conference. And honestly, the conference was the best decision I ever made. Sure, I had to spend rent money and then it was really tight and I was scrappy and it ended up all working out. I ended up getting a client like literally the day before rent was due and I was able to pay it. But that conference in itself changed the direction I was going in business and reinvigorated the way that I was doing business. So in my eyes, it ended up paying off. Now, that doesn't mean that's the smartest thing, right? I want you to explore best case and worst case scenarios for every single financial aspect and financial decision you make when it comes to making the decision, do I push forward or scale back? But just know, like, all of this is really scary. And when you're an entrepreneur, every fucking day is a battle, right? You don't know if you're going to die or survive. But more often than not, things work out, even if it's not in the scenario that you liked. But I will say the best case scenario journaling prompt has been fucking really, really helpful. The next thing that I mentioned was the support system, right? That's the fourth kind of category or kind of topic. When it's time to push forward or scale back, I will say that the people around you are going to be a massive indicator of if you can hold on, like actually contain the space to push forward or you have to scale back. So there have been a lot of moments where I was kind of in a decision. Do I scale back? Do I cut this down? Do I start from scratch or do I push forward? And honestly, completely ripping my support system out by the roots and starting over has been the biggest help when it comes to deciding to push forward with many things that I probably would have bailed on. So I'm not dating the person I was when I started this journey. I'm not friends with the people that I'm with, when I started this journey either. I've had to make clear boundaries and set boundaries with my family in order to keep pushing forward. But it's really fucking hard if there are people in your world who, when the first sign of trouble comes up, they're like, nah, man, that's not for you. Like, this isn't working, blah, blah, blah. So if you find that there are people in your life who are saying those things, who are kind of hurting you when it comes to pushing forward, for a second, like think, okay, are they doing this out of love? Are they doing this out of sort of, fear? Are they doing this out of judgment? Are they putting their projections on you, or are they actually saying it because they have experience? So the only time I will ever take advice from someone when it comes to doing something that might feel a little against what I normally do is if it's someone that's done something. So I'm not going to get advice from someone who's never run a business on what to do when I run out of cash in my business. I'm just not. Same thing goes for, you don't ask your friend who's been chronically single how to date. I'm sorry, that doesn't. If you're trying to figure out how to find a man and you're trying to get married, I'm not going to ask my girlfriend who hasn't dated someone in 6 years. Like, I'm not. Now, I know like there are moments where we want to consult with people that we love when we're in that hard time of do we push forward or scale back. And it's good to get their perspective because they might bring something to the table that you yourself haven't seen, but also recognize that you have no business taking someone else's advice other than your own if these people are not you. They don't know your background, they don't know your skill set. And even if they did know your skill set, if they're still against it and they're not giving you clear reasons or actual like reasons that make sense why, and when you have a conversation, if at all you can have a conversation and there's pushback, like you got to find new support system. You got to find new people in your corner to help you to support the push forward or scale back moment. Now, when it comes to scaling back, right, how do we recognize when it's time to scale back? Because there's moments where they kind of look like the same, right? Now, for me, there's been sort of four areas. There's burnout and mental health, financial strain, market saturation, which is like the rational business side, and then lack of growth, which is all encompassing, right? It's not just business related. So from a burnout and mental health or even just physical health standpoint, this is going to be, I would say, the biggest indicator, even above finances, because I've seen it. I've made a lot of money in my corporate career, but the burnout that I was and stress I was experiencing were just to the point of tears, as well as like literal, like physical breakdown of my body. And that's not okay. So at my most stressed in business, when I knew I needed to scale back or I needed to trim the fat essentially in business and do something new, was I couldn't sleep. I had constant stomach aches. My emotions were not balanced, like extremely volatile. And I was at that point, like, I was like, okay, maybe I just need to incorporate exercise, right? Eat better. Even those things weren't working. That's when I was like, okay, something needs to shift. Oh, other things. If my skin breaks out or I'm choosing bad foods or bad sort of coping mechanisms over and over and over again, that's also to me, I'm recognizing like I'm experiencing stress to the point that I don't have any sort of mental capacity to choose better for myself. Now that's a problem. Now, also at the worst, the very worst I've ever been mental health wise when being a business owner was where I was having days where like I couldn't get out of bed. And I'm not talking about physical exhaustion. I literally couldn't get out of bed because I didn't have the drive or the passion to do what I wanted to do anymore and I wanted to bail. And there were days where I was like, I don't know if I want to be here anymore, like physically on this earth. And it doesn't mean that I'm not, I don't, I wasn't experiencing any mental health struggles in the sense of like I would bring myself to do something like that. But it was a very real thing. Like, what mess did I make and how the fuck did I get here? So that was a moment of like, okay, not only are you experiencing like stress that you can't even fucking manage, but also like burnout to the point that like you are just like completely crumbling. Massive problem, right? So that's when you have to recognize, okay, like this is not working. A little stress is good. It's always a good thing to kick our ass into gear, but that was not cute. Now, the other thing is financial strain. Now, I wouldn't say necessarily this is a big one for me because I've been at this point able to push through with a lot of that stuff. And also, I recognize all of these things are temporary. Financial setbacks, debt, these are temporary things that within 2 to 5 years can completely go away. Right. So it really depends on what your threshold of pain is. But some indicators of when it's time to scale back was that it takes away your joy from the creative process. So if you are so stressed to the point that you don't actually enjoy doing what you're doing anymore, it's time to take a pause for a second. Like, am I actually doing this because I want to, or am I doing this because I feel like if I do another episode, I'll finally get the brand deal or like whatever it is? Because that goes into my next thing where it's like the desperate energy, right? People can feel energy, right? That's why they say vibes don't lie. So if you feel like you are in this desperate energy of like, you'll take any client, you'll do any brand deal, you'll do anything, any door that opens your way, much like if you are in desperate energy when you date and you'll go on any date with any guy just to try it, that is not a good, that's bad. That's something where you need to recognize like, okay, like we all have desperate energy sometimes. It happens, right? It's a very normal thing when you are kind of in a standstill and your back is against the wall. But if this is constantly happening and there's no sort of like reprieve from it, you might need to scale back a bit, right? You're spending too much, you're spending your energy, your creative energy too much. It's not being put in a place that's kind of reciprocating. So you got to possibly stop. Now, the other thing too is obviously when every door is closing in your face. So if you're talking with clients, no one's closing. If no one's buying your programs, if you even can't even think of the idea to sell things, like those are doors that are closing in your face that are either saying you need to scale back in terms of like turn this business around and try something new, or just means you need to pause because there's power in the pause. And that's not an easy thing to do, but it's important. Now, one final thing too in the financial aspect is when it comes to planning and budgeting, it's really hard to do in business. This is something I'm not 100% up to speed on. It's really difficult when you don't have recurring revenue to save money, to budget money, all of that stuff. But I will say Novo, who is also a sponsor for the podcast, I talk about them all the time. I'm obsessed with them, which is why I'm working with them. They're not a bank, but they're a fintech company, and essentially they help me hide my money. So I get paid through my Novo account, but they also have these things called reserves that really help to create a buffer. So when money comes in, I can't just get access to it. It comes in and then it goes into different places like taxes, employee payments, all these different areas that kind of helps to budget better. So if I mentally and emotionally can't do it, at least the system itself will do it for me. And again, you can always move it around, but that has been really, really helpful for me. And having a system like that also was really helpful when I was in corporate, right? Actually putting my money in other places so I could pay things off versus having a lump sum in a bank account that indicates you have enough to spend when realistically you don't. Now, the third is market saturation. So we kind of talked about market demand in the first aspect, which is when it's time to push forward, right? There's a clear indicator that there's a demand, which means you need to go full force. But if the market is too crowded, which I will say, I think it's kind of bullshit because sure, there's a lot of people doing a lot of the same shit, but not everyone has the same story as you. So every photographer has different experience. They come from different life experiences, teaching, education, all of that stuff, and they're all going to have different sort of aspects in how they do things. So I'll keep going with the photography thing for just a second, but you have lifestyle photographers, you have photographers who do headshots, you have photographers who do weddings. Like there are all these subcategories, and even within those subcategories, there are like styles, right? Maybe some people do more vintage photography, some only do black and white. There's a lot of different things. So one thing though is when the market is too crowded, I mean, this is a conversation for a different day, but it also is something that I'm starting to create now called a niche navigator. But often when the market is too crowded, it's because you haven't niched down enough to address the right market. But use ChatGPT to kind of look at all your stuff and talk about your viewpoint, your vision, and your mission and say, okay, how many people are actually in this industry? And how many of these people are actually doing things with it? Because there's a lot of career coaches, right? There's a lot of photographers, there's a lot of whatever, but how many of them are actually making moves, and how many of them are actually closing clients and have things to sell? It might be very small. So just for a second, think about what differentiates yourself and then pivot accordingly. Again, I mentioned my episode with Tiff before. It's episode 150. That episode's going to really help you reposition yourself and understand your story better so that if the market is too crowded, which again, I'm a little bit up in arms about that because I think everyone has a place to be online and do things. It'll really help you to understand what makes you special, which means like you can attract the right audience for you. And also a reminder, you don't need a zillion followers. You don't. Now, the last thing is lack of growth. Now, this is a little hard because when it comes to scaling back, there's a different sort of approach to growth that I think every single business owner is going to have, an individual, right? So I think some clear indicators that your business isn't growing, if you've been doing this for a while, especially, but I would say quarter to quarter, year to year, is monetarily, follower count, content creation, right? The cadence of it, how often you do it, if you feel inspired by it, and even media stuff. But overall, like, do you still have pride and joy for what you're doing? Like, do you actually know what you're talking about? Are you excited about it? When you talk to people and have conversations with them, are you actually excited to share what you're doing? Because at one point I wasn't, and now I am, but one point I wasn't. And that to me, like, also showed a lack of growth. Like, okay, you've been doing this for a while and you're still not excited about it. Like that means you need to backtrack and figure some shit out. But the other thing too is, right, those are sort of like those are sexy kind of indicators of growth, right? They're very tangible indicators of growth, right? Money, follower, like, right? Those are really easy to kind of grab. But the other thing here to remember is mental and spiritual growth is also really important. And they're kind of the basis and foundation of what creates a successful business. Some of the big things that have really kind of indicated to me, like that, I basically need to keep pushing forward. And also, I've built a lot in terms of like my, spiritual and mental growth is I handle stress a lot better. I'm overall happier despite not achieving, societal goals, right? The status and money and things like that. And I also trust myself in life a bit more. It's not, those things aren't always definite, right? Sometimes I backtrack. But if any of those things are kind of, again, lacking, again, whether it's that first one where it's sort of those like sexy metrics, right? The vanity metrics are not there. And or you also compare it to the mental or spiritual growth, like you're not really seeing growth within yourself. You're not seeing growth within your level of trust. You're kind of repeating the same patterns and behaviors. Nothing is really changing. That's an indicator of like, okay, we might need to scale back and readjust things. Again, just like I had mentioned before, use AI. Like if you're really stuck and you can't see, which is also something like when you're the secret ingredient within like a little bundle of ingredients in a spice jar, it's really difficult to see what you've got going on, right? So ask other people, ask AI, and see if they can see growth. Because for a while, I didn't think that I was growing because again, like my monetary growth, it's been going, but it's like not to the level I want it to be. And same with followers, like, that's growing, but it's taking a really long time. And all these different indicators of what, when you compare with other people, can be kind of hard. But I actually plugged all my shit into Chat GPT and it was like, no, bitch, you're growing. Like it just might not be the level you want it to be. But also just a reminder, like most businesses, what's considered good is an 8% growth every single year. And for most of us, it's actually more than that. So I didn't realize I'm actually like at the top of the level of growth, even though, again, it's still small growth for me. It's at like 38% year over year, which is fucking nuts. But either way, right? Sometimes it's important to see the facts, and sometimes it's also important to do a internal check because you never know. Now, when it comes to identifying the signs to push forward versus recognizing when it's time to scale back and pause, there's a couple tools and tricks you can kind of, embrace. So I talked about some of them, but one thing, it sounds stupid to say, but you gotta set realistic goals, guys. Like, I'm someone who also does this, and it's just because I'm really motivated and ambitious person. I always set really ridiculous goals, and I most of the time can achieve them or a fraction of them. But like, if you're not making any money in your business and you say you're gonna make $1 million like next year, like it's probably not gonna happen. And that doesn't mean it's not, right? But the likelihood of it actually happening is very, very hard. So try to be realistic, and with being realistic, be flexible also in how you make those goals, right? How you make them reality. Because if you're really rigid in the way that you try to go about them, it's not going to happen. The other thing too is sometimes the goals you set, like for example, I talked about the vanity metrics before. Like last year, I was like, oh, I want to hit 10K on Instagram next year. I'm at like 6,300, I think, right now. And then I had this moment of like, do I really fucking need that? Like, honestly, is that really going to be something that helps me in this business? Or do I need to focus on the people I already have? And so after 6 months, I recognized, no, we don't really, that's not a goal that actually makes sense to me. It's more important for me to nurture the people who are here. So like, again, that's when it goes back to like, do we scale back? Sometimes you don't need to actually scale back. You just need to kind of reconfigure what you're working towards. And that's okay. Again, like I said, use ChatGPT to set goals if you don't even know what the fuck you're working towards. Cause sometimes, again, you don't know what you don't know. Now, the next thing is kind of stupid, but time management. So when you're a business owner, it's really fucking hard to set a routine for yourself when you don't have a boss telling you what to do. Now, I know myself well enough over these 3 years to know when I'm most creative and when I can kind of get up and get moving and whatnot. But also, I know myself well enough that there are seasons of life. So I've had seasons of life where I'm a morning person. And typically, I would say 80% of the time I'm a morning person over the course of my 30 years, 31 years being alive. But there have been phases where I'm a night person, where I actually want to sleep till 12 p.m. and I want to just work throughout the day into the night. And so sometimes you need to change the way you do work, but also to capitalize and kind of harness when you are at your best throughout the day. So I know in the morning I have to go get a workout in to get all the demons out. I got to come back, do work from like whatever, 7 to noon, and then I'm done. Like any afternoon shit, I'm tapped out unless I just happen to have like caffeine or I'm just really inspired or have calls or things that are like it just so happens to be a different sort of day that I'm then energized to do things, then that's okay. But mostly the afternoons and tonight for me is just playtime. Like that for me, that's how I manage my time. But it is really hard. And obviously, like if you're on a sort of goal or track to achieve certain things, you gotta be rigid in your routines, but it's not always easy. So you gotta just take a moment to kind of do an audit of what's working, what's not, what routines are supporting you and which aren't. And those will also indicate, is it time to push forward or scale back? Because sometimes if you're not using your time wisely, but you're like, oh, do I keep pushing forward or scale back? Like maybe what it is not push forward, but it's change the way you do things so that when you do push, it's not as heavy. It doesn't take as much time and your time is better well spent. The last thing is just continued learning, which again, these all sound so basic and stupid, but I think in the pushing forward versus scaling back, sometimes it seems like you have to do one or the other, but I think it's something that is universally always happening. So, in moments where I had to push forward, right, that looks like spending a lot to work with a coach, go to a conference, purchase a digital download, like do things that are scaring the shit out of me, but I know in my gut is going to help. And then sometimes continued learning looks like, hey, I'm going to scale back on my business. I'm going to pause doing my podcast. I'm going to pause writing my newsletter. And instead, I'm going to pivot and learn more about myself. So I might go do like, a 10-day meditation at home, or I might read like The Artist Way last summer. I spent the entire 12 weeks actually taking that like a course, right? It's only a $20 book on Amazon, but I took it really seriously. And that actually helped me in a scale back period when I couldn't spend a lot, but it still helped me move forward. So it was like an interchange scale back, push forward moment. There's a ton of things available, right, in corporate quitter world and many other worlds. We also have a lot of products that we're going to be developing over the next few weeks through Notion. So it's going to be free, mostly really easy, accessible, no courses or any of that bullshit that takes hours and hours. Like I really want things to be simple. Like I said, the niche navigator's coming. We're reinvigorating a lot of our existing, things that we have, like our insurance and benefits guide, stuff like that for entrepreneurs and quitters. So I'm hoping between what I talked about today and getting some of your feedback, I can help you in those moments when you don't know if you push forward or scale back. But that's all I have to talk about today. I didn't realize this episode was going to be as long as it did, but have a great rest of your week, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.